Hi there, welcome to the halftime huddle. Hopefully, we're going live today. He's been some challenges over the last couple of weeks, but this week I'm hoping we go live because we've got a lovely conversation with someone I'll introduce in a second. But for those people who have stumbled across this by accident and have never been to the halftime huddle before, this is an opportunity halfway through the week to just take a breath to re-galvanize, reorganize, and rejuvenate your energy levels, so that essentially what starts off as a great week gets to midweek hump day. We all know we've heard about hump day. It can be a bit of a challenge. So we're here at hump day to hopefully get ourselves a little bit more motivation for the second half of the week. And as we do this, sometimes I'm loving to bring more and more people to have a conversation with halfway through the week. And today, got another great guest to spend some time to talk with. This is Brad Bucceri, who we met across the Zoom internet networking. And quickly, I got to know that he'd got a great business, and we spent some quite a bit of time chatting one-to-ones. And also, I brought him to come and talk to our monthly expert series, and hopefully we'll explore some of the topics he talked about there as well. But without sort of dithering too much more, so I just would like to introduce Brad with Cherry. So, hi, Brad.
Hello, thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah, it's good to have you here, and I'm looking forward to a long old conversation because, like I said, again, every time I do this, we have a little bit of time just prior to bringing everybody on, and we have a little bit of a chat, just find out what's going on, and all the time, without fail. I start thinking, oh my goodness, these are great topics and great ideas, and hopefully we'll bring some of them in front of you guys later on. But first things first, for those people who don't know you, Brad, it'd be a great opportunity to share your what I like to talk about your origin story. What brought you to where you are now, and your business sense maker, which and we will talk about it, is going through a an important celebration in terms of it's 21 years old.
Mhm.
So we can obviously talk a little bit more about that. But firstly, what is SenseMaker? How did you get to it? And why you? So, um, yep.
Sure thing. So, thank you. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So for me, what is SenseMaker and how did I get there and why me? So, SenseMaker is a business that was founded 21 years ago this year by my dad, who is still in the business. He's my business partner. Um, I'm a director in the business now, but I've always had a hand in the business in some way, shape, or form over those 21 years. And it was kind of alongside my own career whilst I was working in the digital design industry, web design, user experience design, marketing, etc. And the way that I got into that, so my journey's got a few kind of threads to it, really. So I never really got on with school, and so I had to find a way to get into the creative industry that I wanted to be in that didn't require me showing everybody a piece of paper that said, here's a degree, you can Brad can do what he claims he can do. So I had to very early on learn a whole bunch of different skills, designing in Photoshop, Illustrator, HTML, CSS, user experience design, all of these things. I had to learn all of those skills to be able to create projects to showcase to these agencies to prove that I could do what I was saying I could do. And so I managed to do that. I worked my way into the industry, working in London. That's where the dream was. All the trendy agencies were in London, but something didn't quite feel right. And even when I left that creative industry and I was building a marketing team in-house for a group of companies, it didn't quite feel right. Something was missing, and I became aware that everybody around me had these skills. Most people that they were very good at one thing in particular, and because of how I got into the industry, I realized that I was average at a bunch of different skills, and that really kind of bothered me. And so I set about trying to understand in my personal life what my purpose was, what my reason for doing was, and on that journey, a long story short, kind of everything kind of came together, and I realized that you can take the uniqueness of an individual and blend it with the marketing that you have in a business and make that business unique. So the founder of that business, nobody thinks like them, nobody solves problems like them, nobody's had their life journey. And so you take that uniqueness, you put it in and infuse it into their business is going to be unique. And that's kind of how I got to where I am today. At the same time as that, all of that, SenseMaker was growing over the years, and I was working on the side to do the creative work for my dad once he had founded the business. And we always really struggled to articulate what it was that he was doing. We knew it wasn't coaching, we knew it wasn't consulting, it was something different, but we could only use the words that coaches and consultants used. And so over time, it's been a process of removing ourselves from that group and positioning ourselves in this area of sense making as sense makers, and getting better and better and practicing how we articulate that difference to the world. So I don't know if that answers your question completely, but that's my intro. Yeah.
No, no, and it's great, and like I said in the intro with introducing you, we you have come to talk to our group, and it's very much the message you came across about helping to make a business and a business unique by, like you say, merging and melding the uniqueness of the individual with
Yes.
the business they do, and you have a very keen eye on finding other people's uniqueness, which is which I've noticed. With that in mind, one of the things that I like to talk about is superpowers
Right.
and kryptonite, which we've come across, and kryptonite is we will leave for one side, but very much would you say your superpower is understanding and making sense of individuals? Because
Strangely, actually, it's a bit of a twist around, because I think I would say that my superpower turned out to be the fact that I was average at a number of different things,
uh-huh.
because it put me in this position where I was able to. I had interesting perspectives from a lot of different angles,
Mhm.
which allowed me to look at things differently. So people might often hear Steve Jobs' famous quote of "think different," and on the surface, it's quite confusing. It's a bit vague. It's a bit meaningless. But I think what he meant by that was, build these perspectives, look at how you're limiting your own thinking, and then find a way to dismantle that and put it back together in a way that's going to take you forward. And so I think being average is my superpower, because it led to all of these other things. So yeah.
I think that's an interesting take on it, and I think you're probably right because you've got a lot broader viewpoint and broader experience. You can bring some of that broadness to the automatic focus that people have when they
Yeah.
have their skills, because it's very easy to get lost in the speak of what they
Mm.
do and their jargon and all that kind of stuff. And you have someone with a broader viewpoint, he can cut through to that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, especially in what I do, where I help people with this positioning with purpose, to be able to look at it creatively and understand how other brands are doing what they're doing and how that might impact them creatively, to look at it from a language point of view and a words point of view and see how that works, and kind of a technical perspective, and sort of break down all these pieces of what it takes to make a business stand out, make a business unique, dismantle them and approach it in a completely fresh way, and then make it accessible for other people. I think it's yeah, it can be the only thing that is my superpower, I reckon.
Fair enough. And I like the way, again, that and I see this quite a bit. You talked about your superpower being the fact that you felt average at everything. Yeah, so many people could specify that that's also the kryptonite. I'm just average at everything. I mean, where are my strengths? And your strength, as you say, is the thing that also would maybe come across as your kryptonite. And I'm just average at everything.
Yeah, I think possibly I would take that a level deeper,
Okay.
and I would say perhaps the kryptonite of that is not being self-aware enough to the
Uh-huh.
point of being able to acknowledge flaws in yourself. And so
Yeah.
And so if I was in a place where I wasn't looking, everybody has a dream, right? Everybody's doing what they're doing to get to a thing. If I didn't have a compelling enough dream, I wouldn't be where I am now, because I wouldn't have solved the problems that I was solving. And so being average, yep, you could say it could be the kryptonite or the superpower, but I think being in a position where I'm analyzing myself and saying, okay, that didn't go how it went, or Brad, you could do better at this, led me to a point where I was able to say, actually, this can be flipped on its head. So if we don't have that level of self-awareness, self-analysis, and self-correction, I think that's more dangerous than anything else.
No, and I think that's very true, and I can see how people like you and your business can help um, to be that level of self awareness, that external self awareness, because
Yeah.
like you say, sometimes being aware that you're not always the best person to look at what's going on,
Yes.
because
Yes.
you have a certain number of biases, you have a certain number of blinkers based upon what you're
Yeah.
doing. Having that second opinion outside and
Yeah.
knowing that you need that is
Yeah.
sometimes just enough self awareness for you to get past that initial challenge.
That's exactly it. And like you said there, with the blinkers, paradigms, lenses, we can't be objective with ourselves because we are ourselves. We're emotionally led beings. And so even when we sit down and say, right, I'm going to be objective, I'm going to look at myself from an objective standpoint, and I'm going to find these things and I'm going to correct them, we're automatically looking at it through different emotional lenses. And depending on what context we're on in our lives at that moment in time, the lenses shift again. And so it can be really challenging. So to have somebody as a sounding board is really important. I've seen an interesting shift in what I'm doing recently, which was completely unexpected, and that is that my primary audience is founders, business owners, and in any industry really. But the one that I expected the least to come along and leverage this service that I provide is branding agencies and marketers. And more branding agencies and marketers are actually using this to get clear on their messaging and their uniqueness and what they do, because they do it for other people, but it's so hard to do it for ourselves. And so they've recognized, that they need that sounding board. And so it's really interesting being able to say, I probably am looking at this situation through a lens, a filter, a paradigm that I'm not aware of. What can I do? What questions can I ask myself to reveal that, so that I can dismantle it and reassemble it in a way that's going to be more helpful to help me move past this whatever block it is that I'm facing. I had it just Friday night. I was struggling with something again, and I was like, I know there's something blocking me here, but I can't quite see it. And then all of a sudden the lights come on. I was like, oh my gosh, there it is, and I could do something about it. So you just got to keep at it, keep asking those questions, and get outside perspective on what you're doing.
I 100% follow you on that. In that, um, there is always a lot of value by just getting some feedback from people, even just um, getting them to ask a question, because one of the challenges that we face in our groups is that people have a lot of assumptions about how they do the business. They have a lot of assumptions about what's the best way to do X, Y, Z, and go around and solve the various problems that they come across. And sometimes those assumptions are keeping them in the same loop, in the same
Yeah.
level. And by having someone who can look outside and challenge those assumptions,
Yeah.
by even asking simple questions that the person who's asked that question then has to go back to first principles almost and start thinking
Yeah.
about, well, why am I doing that? And having that kind of sounding board
Yeah.
is key really to help you through those blocks.
That's it. And if I am in a situation where I don't have a sounding board, I tend to, when I'm asking myself questions, I tend to avoid starting the question with why, because it tends to lead to more of an emotional response. And so I always start the questions with what or how, and find a way to ask myself that way. And I just, if I'm stuck on something, I'll write down what I think the problem is, and then I'll just write down all the questions I've got related to that, and then start trying to answer them. And it just helps you to, I guess it's one of the ways that you can start to move past that lensing effect, if you like, when you are having to do it by yourself.
Yes, yes, yes. I very much. I had a talk last week or the week before where we brought the what they call the six honest trade servicemen from Rudyard Kipling's poem, and you're
Right.
right, who, what, where, when, why and how, and
Yeah.
all of them, all of them need to be sort of asked, and phrasing some of your questions in with using those gives you, like you said, the opportunity to maybe view things in a slightly different way.
Yeah. Yeah. And become aware of the thoughts that you're thinking. So if you're stuck on something and you're trying to sort of break out of it, even if you're trying to identify the old unhelpful viewpoint or behavior pattern that's kind of keeping you stuck there, if you are like listening to the thoughts that you're having, you'll recognize actually that is probably part of that unhelpful viewpoint, because at its core we've got that sort of fight or flight um, built into our brain. And something I've learned recently actually is that there are these two ways of thinking. There's away from thinking and there's toward thinking. And some of us, or all of us, are predisposed to one or the other. It doesn't mean that we never, if I have away from thinking, it doesn't mean that I never have toward thinking, which is more proactive and problem solving. But it just means that I'm more likely to think in away from thinking. Away from thinking is the way I understand it, is thinking in a way that the language I use is about keeping me safe and keeping me from harm. So it's more on that flight than the fight,
Yeah.
and vice versa for the toward thinking. And so I think, that example that I gave on Friday night, I was sitting there and I was thinking, what is it that's keeping me stuck? I was thinking this thing over here can't possibly be the solution to the problem I'm having, because it doesn't look like the solution. And a little voice popped in my head and said the paradigm that's kept you stuck here for all this time. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is the solution, but I just couldn't see it because there was this viewpoint, this paradigm that was trying to keep me in this place of safety. And so once you see it, you can break apart from it and move forward. And yeah, it's so useful, and you have to be able to do that. Yeah.
No, and again, understanding your basic comfortable
Yeah.
level of, whether you're someone who, like you say, moves away from frightening situations through someone who moves towards wonderful situations, sort of thing.
Yes.
And that kind
Yes.
of paradigm, if you understand that, then
Yeah.
occasionally you can flip it on the head, what's in the blue moon, and say,
Yeah.
I'm moving to it because I think it's just a bright and sparkly thing,
Yeah.
or should I be thinking a little bit more about what is holding me back, what is causing me upset and distress, and
Yeah.
should I be moving away from that?
Yeah, and is the language that I'm using in a non-conscious way keeping me stuck? So, for an example, would be, I'm one of these people. My wife's a lot more relaxed than I am. I'm one of these people. If the kids are running down a steep hill or on a climbing frame, I'm like on edge, trying to make sure they don't hurt themselves. And the language that I would generally use in the past would have been something like, oh, don't do that. I don't want you to hurt yourself, right? That's away from thinking. The opposite of that, toward thinking, would be, okay, let's have fun, but make sure we do it safely. Be aware of these things,
Yeah,
guys, when
yeah,
you're playing on there. And you can so clearly see the difference in those things. But the thing that's interesting is that until you're aware that there's those two types of thinking, your thinking and your actions and your words to you sound like the other side of the fence. So if I was talking and thinking in a way from, I thought it sounded like people that were in toward thinking, if that makes sense. So I didn't recognize there was a difference. And so people talk about mindset a lot. It's actually a very real thing. Once you learn about it and start to unpack it, the psychology behind it is very, very interesting. I mean, I scratched the surface, not even scratched the surface, sniff the surface. But yeah, it's super interesting subject.
no, absolutely, and it resonates back to your idea of being self-aware, being
Mm,
sort of in touch of your the way you do things, in touch of the way you generally approach, like you say, towards or away from.
yeah.
Understanding that and recognizing that is already the first step towards doing things in a different way and growing.
100%, and it's the key actually to starting on that journey of becoming aware as to what your superpower is, right? To use your words, or what your uniqueness is. It's all of those elements come into play. Having someone as a sounding board makes that easier, but you can practice these skills to get better at it yourself to an extent. Yeah,
No, absolutely, and I would imagine it'd be interesting to understand. Is that the sort of when you're dealing with when you're working with individuals and trying to get them to pull out their uniqueness or their well,
yeah.
whatever term you use, is that the sort of first step is to try and recognize what is their basic automatic sort of what's the autopilot system that they're running on and that kind of stuff.
Well, that's the thing that's so interesting is when we're doing what we're doing, because it comes naturally to us, we assume that it's easy for everybody else, and so very often we tend to gloss over the thing that makes us unique and makes us useful and different to everybody else. And so, what I do at the start when I start working with somebody is I always do like a founders interview, which is like an hour Zoom call where I run through some questions, we have a conversation and kind of download their thoughts and their journey. And from that, I can start to see these hints of how they think and maybe what's led them to think in that way and what's led them to create the solution that they create. But if I was giving a signpost to somebody to say, here's a good place to start digging if you want to find that unique aspect to what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. So can you document how you're doing it? The way I draw it for people is um, like a, I don't know, like a timeline, if you like, where you've got two lines with a line in the middle, and we say, okay, this is how I believe my audience feels right now, where they're stuck. This is how they want to feel when they're unstuck, right? What are the stepping stones? What are the things that I do in between those 2 points to help them bridge that gap? And if you can unpack that, you're a long way toward being able to express and articulate what it is that makes you unique and your unique way of helping your audience. So yeah, I would start digging there. That's actually where I start with a lot of clients.
Okay. So you start by getting them to be conscious of what they do and how they do it,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
like I said, again, a lot of people are on autopilot, and they
yes.
go in and solve the problems or help they move their customers forward or get them across to where they're hoping to get to, and it's done without being conscious about how it's done. So you're pulling back and helping
Yeah.
them to get conscious about that.
Yeah, and because we do it naturally, we do these things naturally, we don't feel like it's anything to shout
Okay.
about, And so quite often people will say, "Oh no, but that's simple." What we lose sight of is the fact that we've been on a journey and we're always moving, right? We tend to get um, I don't know, it gets a bit blurry for us because we're always looking up to other people who are doing what we want to be doing. And so we forget about where we've been or where we've come from. And so because we're always looking at these other people, the skills we've got, the knowledge we've got, the way we solve problems never looks enough. But if we just turn ourselves around and look at the people who are stuck where we once were, all of a sudden the knowledge we've got, the way we see things is super valuable. And it's to us, right? Because we can use it in business, but it's valuable to the people who are stuck as well because they desperately want to have that journey, to have that transformation, to be where we are. And so I think again, it's that mindset shift of am I measuring myself against where I want to be, or am I looking at where I've come from and how I can help those people?
Oh, great! I love the idea of that. That again, uh, we're seeming to find a little theme here about sort of turning things slightly on their on twist and looking back rather than looking
Yeah,
forward and
yeah,
etc. And I love the way to just that simple, in the terminology of the coach, just reframe
Yeah,
the situation,
yeah,
can be a brilliant way of just breaking through your blockage.
yeah. And even that term there that you used of reframing comes full circle back to this idea of paradigm and lenses, right?
Yeah,
It's all part of the same thing, but it feels separate until, and this sounds silly, but it feels separate until we realize that it's part of the same thing. And the clearer we get on what is causing the challenge, the easier and the better we'll get at solving that challenge for ourselves. Which is why it made sense to me um, to get insight and understanding on how minds work. So kind of accidentally 5 years ago, I realized that I was interested in psychology and just picked up these books about the brain and the mind and how it works, because I figured if I can understand how I think and how my brain works and why I do things, I'm going to be able to do better for myself. But at the same time, it's kind of like a double win, because you understand, if you understand your brain, you understand other people's, and so you can help them. Quite often we'll resist the right solution because it feels like we're coming out of that place where our mind is trying to keep us safe. And so if you understand how people think and how their minds work, you can help them to feel safe in making that transition and that step to the place that you need them to be for them to get the result they want. And that can have financial gain for you as a business owner, but it also has transformational impact on that person themselves as well. So
indeed, I think one of the other things that we sometimes miss when we're dealing with our customers or our clients, when we're trying to make them go from a position of comfort through to a position of unknown and scariness,
yeah,
is you forget also that you're going to be along there with them, so they're not
yeah,
doing this alone. You with the sense maker system will be helping them to come to terms with it and moving forward and understanding, so they won't have to do these things on their own.
yeah.
So what originally might have been a scary step if you'd just said, "Go and do that, and I'll come back in 12 months and see how
Yeah,
you got
yeah,
on."
exactly, exactly. Well, firstly, because they don't have the context or the what we call platforms of understanding, and so, a lot of these people, you see them online, they're selling these blueprints and whatever. But the problem with those, or the challenge with those, is that the person that buys it is buying a framework, but they don't have the understanding behind that framework, and so we get sort of sucked in by what looks like a shortcut. But shortcuts don't exist. All that those people are selling is a shortcut to the door that leads to the long cut, right? You have to do the journey and you have to get those platforms of understanding so that you've got the perspective that you need to make the shifts that you need. And yeah, some people might be thinking to themselves, well, I've got a product. How does this work for me? Show people how to use the product to get the transformation. It doesn't have to just be a service. It works for products as well. If people are scared, look at what you're selling. If it's a service or a product, how can I simplify this for people and make it easier for them to consume it? So for example, in the work that I do, a lot of the thinking is very different. One of the things I've done, I used to do 2 hour sessions at a time, but one of the things I've done is shrink those down to 1 hour sessions at a time, because the thinking was so different. People would get exhausted,
Yeah.
and you get this sort of diminishing returns over time where you're not getting as much out of the thinking. And so it's about saying, how can I make this easier for people to consume so that it's not scary, they can have that transformation. Yeah,
No, absolutely, and the baby step sort of process of taking small steps outside of the in towards the unknown, or outside of your um cliched comfort zone,
mm,
is where you can help. And like I said, and by giving them a blueprint is a good idea. It's a good
yes,
thing, knowing what you're doing, because it gives you a little bit of a it can give the person who doesn't know how to step out and do the thing, or take the leap, or make the transformation. It gives them a little bit of a context of what sort of things they may have to go through. So
yeah,
a blueprint or is a brilliant thing,
yeah,
but having someone to hold your hand while you take those steps through the blueprint, and you're still, even with a blueprint, you're still going
yeah,
to have to take go through the journey, and the journey is where the transformation actually happens, not
Yeah.
reading the blueprint.
And I think also realizing that, yeah, the blueprint is there, but you know, the, we are allowed to play around with stuff. So a lot of what I do when I'm helping people position their business is helping them to understand actually in a visual way what the world means when they talk about niching, right? Because everyone's told, oh, you got to niche down, but it's such a vague thing and it drives me bonkers because it means nothing. Um, to show people what it means to be niching down, I think that you have to realize that, say for example, um, I'm in this area of coaching, right? And you've got this coach thing. And like I said earlier, we were struggling to articulate how we were different. We knew what we did wasn't coaching or consulting, but because the marketplace was called coaching and consulting, that was the label we had to use. And so you get this feeling of, oh, that doesn't quite feel right. Have I niched correctly? Have I done this? How do I niche? What should my niche be? We don't realize that actually that's all flexible, and we don't have to settle for a label that doesn't fit what we do. We can do this piece of thinking that allows us to say, oh, okay, now I know how to talk about how I'm different. What is the label that best fits that difference? And then promote that, broadcast that, and teach people. And so realizing that not all rules are set in stone. We can play around with these things. And just because somebody's decided that this is the best way of doing something doesn't mean it is always going to be the best way of doing something. And you are quite capable of coming up with a better way. You might be the person to come up with a better way. So experiment, explore, break things apart, put them back together. You have to.
Yeah, yeah, and the other flip side of this, or stuff like that, is there is no one way. There is,
Yeah.
there is always, as a developer, in my history and my past, I used to code, and there was one particular programming language called Perl, and the
Mm.
premise behind this programming language is it tried to make multiple ways to do the same sort of thing. So you could do it whichever way suited the process or the thing you were doing. So you essentially had a multi-tool Swiss Army knife sort of thing where you could use many tools to do many different things, but you could use this, and whatever suited the challenge you had, there was a way to do it in this program. And it's a similar thing for when you're trying to specify your business as unique. There is no one way of solving that problem the business that your customer has in front of you.
What's interesting about that analogy is I'd be interested to know, there was multiple ways that you could do a certain thing. Did you have a preferred way of doing it every time, or would you use different ways all the time?
But you'd get one of the challenges is there would be a slightly different way of doing something depending on what your problem was.
Right.
So you would slightly use a subtly different tool, um, based upon what the problem was, or that was the aim. But one of the things I think that you're hinting at is you get into a pattern, you get into a routine, you do get into using the same sort of ways of approaching a problem,
Mm.
and using the same sort of problem. Like for instance, you've got your hammer and your screwdriver, and you use your hammer and your screwdriver. But I think what the premise behind the tool was is that if someone has a preference for a screwdriver, then there's a screwdriver there. If someone has a preference for a hammer or pair of pliers, then you can use a pair of pliers. If someone has a preference for a Phillips rather than a flat screw, then again you could use that.
Yeah.
And if you use it all the time, fine, that's fine. But other people can be using different tools to solve the same problem.
Exactly. And I love that because that's such a good example of how if we understand our uniqueness, we can have competitors all alongside us that are essentially doing the same thing. But when we broadcast that message to the world, there's going to be others who are in alignment with you, so who like using that same way of solving the problem, who are going to say, I'm going to go to Mark because he gets me. And the same would be happening for all the other people that are using the other ways in that programming
Yes.
language to solve those problems. So it's a similar thing. Yeah.
No, yeah, and I like that, and that's very much, um, where it sort of where it comes across is essentially, we back to the mode of operation,
Mm,
the mindset, and the towards and away from. Um, a person who's got a towards mentality will be more attracted to someone who has a similar way of dealing and
mm,
talking about the problem,
mm.
and vice versa. You wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with someone who, if you're trying to keep yourself safe, you wouldn't be comfortable with someone who is
They're going to
always
cause you
talking
to
about
push your
their game.
limits.
Indeed,
Yeah.
indeed. So yeah, so I like that way of talking about that. When you find your uniqueness, your mix of screwdrivers and spanners and the flat screw, etc. The way you approach a problem,
Yeah.
you'll be attracting the people who feel comfortable approaching the problem in that way.
And the cool thing is, right, to use a really nerdy analogy, is once you start to see this stuff for what it is and that it's your mind projecting what it wants you to think is reality and it's not actually real, the dangers that you perceive aren't actually real, you come outside the matrix, right, for want of a
Yeah,
better phrase, and you understand what's happening. As somebody who's providing a solution for others in a service or a product, you can speak to both of those groups because you understand how to communicate to somebody, what language to use to make them feel safe if they've got away from thinking, or what language to use if they've got this sort of real driven proactive toward thinking. And so you can speak to those two groups of people at a high level and then go from there. So yeah, it really gets interesting once you start to become aware of this stuff and what your brain is doing to your perception of reality. Yeah.
no, absolutely, and I think you're right there. I think the I came across a guy who was talking about selling and selling in a different way, and there are people who like to know. There are different modes of buying, basically,
Mm,
modes of buying I like to know all the details before I spend any money. I like to be I buy by my gut. I buy based on emotional connection to the stories you hear, and I buy for bonuses and that kind of stuff. There are various different ways, and
mm.
and the guy was talking about saying, remember that your customers will all have multiple ways of doing this. So just because you buy by gut feeling doesn't mean that you should always sell by gut feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's probably similar to what you're talking about when you recognize and understand and pull back from, this is my comfort zone of working, and this is how I talk about it, and this is how I am comfortable about moving, um, from the from the point of stuckness to the point of solution,
Yeah.
and this is how I talk about it.
Yeah.
Once you pull back and you recognize that there are people out there who would also benefit from your support by
Yeah.
approaching them in a slightly different way.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. So when I hear you talk about that, what that person said, I think I'd perhaps argue that even at the deepest level, it always comes back to that emotional desire, right? Because we don't actually ever do anything unless we want to do it, and wanting comes from an emotional
Yeah,
place. But 100% we can believe that we made a decision based on logic and facts
yeah,
because we justify it to ourselves. And so for me, the sort of heart of everything when you're busy positioning and marketing a product or a service is to anchor it against that emotional want that your audience perhaps has on the other side, and build this narrative of here I understand where you're trying to get to, here's what I've got, and here's why this is the best way for you to get to that ultimate thing. This is going to take you all the way or part of the way closer to where you actually want to be, and that would resonate on an emotional level, and then provide logical um, features, facts, or whatever it might be to help them justify that decision to themselves if that's how they tend to do things. But it always anchors back to what they really want on the other side.
yes, yes. And again, it's in terms of safety or excitement,
Yeah.
sort of saying is some of the anchoring. Are
Yes.
you, yeah, are you happy to just be safe and stay where you are and protect yourself against all the slings and stuff that's coming to you, or you're happy to explore and try do new things, and that's the emotional connection to the service or the product, the
Yeah,
product. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, so coming full circle again is it's good. And what I love about this is so often, um, it's about those basic drives and basic understanding. And once you understand your basic drive and the way that you basically survive and help people, then that can pull out your uniqueness.
Yeah,
I, I'd be intrigued to, you've dealt with, you talk about your founders questionnaire and founders. What sort of businesses do you work with? And this is back to, one of the conversations we had earlier about, um, branded,
right,
working with
right.
brand people. Which was
Yeah.
intrigued me.
Yeah, so I mean, it intrigued me as much as you. It was completely unexpected, to be honest, but I can see why it makes sense now
Yeah,
retrospectively. Um, so I work with any business really. It's more about if they're stuck, if they don't know how to talk in a way that attracts the right people to what they're doing, basically, in a nutshell. Um, so that can be any business, but like I said to you um, before we came on, something that caught me by surprise a little bit was the fact that branding agencies and marketers are using this program that I've got now, and having me take them through this process of identifying what makes them unique, because they've shown good self-awareness, right? They've realized that they can do similar thing for their clients, maybe not to the same level of detail, but they can do a similar thing for their clients, but it's very difficult for them to do it and articulate it for themselves. And so, yeah, that was a bit of an unexpected, but one that I'm quite enjoying, because there's a lot of kind of commonality in the thinking and alignment, and it comes back to that idea of, you can be working with potential competitors, but because you've got a unique perspective and unique way of solving a problem, it doesn't actually matter, and everybody can contribute to everybody else's journey. There's more than enough to go around.
no, absolutely, absolutely, and I'll mention that again. It's one of the biggest, challenges you have to get over, is the fact that you're looking at your competitors as competitors other than
Yeah,
as potential collaborators, and
yeah,
and also potential referral agents, and there's a whole raft of different ways you can view your competitors without viewing
yeah.
them as someone who's out there to steal your business and steal your thunder and your customers.
That's it. And I know there's a theme today. It keeps coming back to this, but once you're strong on the inside, once you know who you are, right, on the inside, none of that stuff matters, because you're not relying on external factors to validate you and yourself. You know who you are, and this is a way that you do something. It's not who you are, it's something you've created, it's a tool that you use. And so it kind of breaks apart that self-defense mode of, I need to protect this, I've got competition, I've got to I can't let them see what I'm doing. It breaks that apart. If you're confident in who you are and why you're doing and who you're helping and the problem you're solving, then all of that kind of just breaks away.
Yeah, and also would go back to the idea of, if your uniqueness is part and parcel of how you service people, then that uniqueness is,
Instantly you're more
yeah,
confident. Yeah,
indeed,
yeah.
no one could take that uniqueness away from you.
Well,
No one
that's
could do
it.
it in the same way as you do, because they're not you. They're not unique. They haven't learned the things you've learned. They haven't gone
Yeah,
along the journey you've gone. Etc.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, I couldn't have put it better myself. Yeah, yeah, perfect. I won't try.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And from like I say, from having you come and talk to us, very much, it was the message you were talking about. That is the thing that sets you as, you and your business as unique, is that special spark that is you, that no one else can replace.
Yeah, and I think it's about understanding, having a basic understanding of marketing, um, to know where to start looking.
Yeah.
So, for example, like I said on that workshop a while ago, um, there it's mentioned in the book that I quite enjoy, which we'll come to. But
Uh-huh.
um, this idea of back in the day, all you needed was the best product and a bit of money to advertise it, and you'd win. Then more and more people are there. There's more people in business, and so all of a sudden it became about how it looked and trust, perceived trust. You get a bigger population explosion again, blah blah blah, and it came to the point of positioning, where you are. It's kind of like a little bit of psychology and understanding how your audience sees the marketplace that you're in. And so when you tell them, I belong to this label of marketplace, they're bunching you and categorizing you with all of those other people. And so it's noisy, you get drowned out. Separating yourself, positioning is the idea of separating yourself from that pack, and so that when they think of the problem you solve, you're standing there on your own and you're the only obvious choice. The problem with that, and I mentioned this in that workshop, is that since that book was written, the population has literally doubled to like 8 billion. And so even with positioning, you have to really think differently. It's not a golden bullet. You have to look at ways of engineering this value and displaying that so that the perception becomes that, right, in positioning. And so I like to take that a step further, like you say, with this idea of positioning with purpose. So you can position with values or you can position with purpose, but it's about saying, okay, this uniqueness is going to help set me apart. And yeah.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the book, because we will come to that. There's a little bit of foreshadowing to talk about the book, which is brilliant. Uh, one of the other things about here, and like I said, I'm more than happy to come and have this conversation for quite a long time, and bring you on again
Yeah,
to
sure.
talk about this. I think, as I mentioned at the top of the show, one of the things about this episode is around this live show is to help people get through the week and help them get through day by day by
Mm-hmm.
day. And as I'm hearing you talk about this, I'm hearing that you're getting to the stage where when you really recognize and understand your purpose and really recognize and understand how you'll get through things and what you do, then it's almost like when it's no longer a job, it's no longer a struggle.
Mm.
And when you find that, and through working with you to find that, um,
Yeah.
it helps to keep the purpose going, helps you to keep you through, because we all know that there is a bit of a bit of a slog to keep going day by day.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when you're connected to your purpose, which is the message
Yeah.
I'm hearing from what you're talking,
Yeah.
is that what you'd say as well?
Yeah. So I think knowing why you do is gonna, I call it your purpose is your propellant, right? It's the rocket fuel that you need to get through those tougher moments where you have to just sort of grind it out and finish something. But not knowing your purpose, on the flip side of that coin, leads us to a place, generally, if we're in our own business or even employed, of feeling unfulfilled.
Yeah,
And that comes down to the fact that we whether we realize it or not, we're not making a positive impact in the lives of other people. And if we can get clear on that purpose, it solves all of those problems. But I would say that, even so, you've got your purpose, but then even before that, you need to know what your anchor is, right? Because a ship without an anchor is drifting lost at sea. So what is it that anchors you? Here, you've got your anchor, you've got your purpose, you understand why you're doing what you're doing. And so every day you can get up and you can say, okay, this is who I am, this is why I do, and this, let me go and do these tasks, these actions, help these people.
yeah, brilliant, and I love that. And like I said, that's very much a great message for people to recognize. Spending some time, um, being conscious about what you do and why you do it can help you keep focusing, keep going, and keep going out there and helping and supporting people.
Yes.
And more power to the people, because we all need those people to help and support.
Yeah.
Whatever the people are going through, the businesses, etc. We all need more of them, because that's it's a shame when you see someone who's got such a brilliant idea and a brilliant purpose, and they run out of steam because they don't understand what it is their purpose is.
That's it. That's it. And one of the things I often say is that there's so many founders that quit because they quit too soon because they think that their product or service isn't good enough. And what they don't realize is that it's actually because they don't know how to articulate the
Mm,
value of it. Had they done that, they would have probably had a completely different response to what they were doing. So don't finish, don't chuck it in before the race is done. Yeah,
yeah,
you've got to get clear on this stuff so that you can push on and get to that finish line. That's why I've got those two finishes medals up there. It's to remind me, those are two half marathons, to remind me of the full marathon that I didn't finish,
yeah,
right? I quit too soon. It was um, in 2019, my dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And him being him, he was like, right, we're going to run a marathon to raise money for Parkinson's. And so I was like, I'm there. I'd always done casual running.
yeah.
In his younger years, he had done marathons, ultra marathons. And so he understood what it took. I didn't. Marathon day came after all the training I'd done, and it was more of a trail run than a road run, which was unexpected. It was at elevation. I had trained at sea level, and it was laps, so I had to run past the finish line 3 times before I could use it.
Uh-huh.
And I got separated from our pack, and I started believing the stories in my head about, you know, I'm feeling this pain, others can't be feeling this bad because they're still going, all of this stuff. And it got the better of me to the point where I finished at 32 kilometers, 10 kilometers short, went through the finish line, had to say no to the finisher's medal, got sent to the timing tent, and the chap there said, well, what's the problem? So I gave him all of my answers that I had told myself. And he said, oh, so basically you had enough. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was like someone poured a bucket of ice water on my head. I was like, what have I done? And you've never felt bad about yourself
Yeah.
until your dad, who's older than you with Parkinson's, finishes a marathon that you don't. And so they're there to remind me of the feeling of how it feels just before you have the success, just before you have the breakthrough. That feeling of I need to quit now is what now keeps me going. When I feel that feeling that I felt on that run that day, I know that I'm close to the finish line, and it helps me to keep pushing to get to that place where I see the breakthrough.
And that on that note, I think that's a wonderful way to end this story and go and leap straight into the book we're talking about. And I hope everybody who's been listening to this can recognize and realize that it yeah, I can't say any more than that. That's brilliant. So thank you. So going back to the book, and the reason I if there are any questions that I try and always do is this one, and as I've said before, I nicked it off Tim Ferriss because
Right.
I love his idea of having a book that people would recommend rather than a book that people are excited about at the moment. Because if you read a lot, the book you're excited about is the book you're reading at the moment.
Yes.
Um, so what would be the book that you would recommend? What is the book that you brought to us today?
So it might be a bit boring for you because obviously you're in the workshop. It's the same book, which is a good sign because I'm not reading it at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's called Positioning by Al Rees and Jack Trout, and it was an interesting one because it was accidental in the sense that I didn't. There was I only found out about it towards the end of last year, and there was a whole everything that I'm doing kind of. How do I say it? It kind of validates the encouragement that I was hoping to give people today about understanding that they have a unique way of solving a problem. And this particular book kind of came from nowhere. Somebody recommended it to me. I was talking to somebody and he said, oh, have you read this book? I said, no. He said, oh, that's what you're talking about. I said, oh, cool. So I went and read the book, and there was a whole bunch of stuff where I was like, oh my gosh, I got to this conclusion myself. I must be doing something right, and it's quite encouraging.
Mm.
And I didn't realize there was kind of a few missing bricks in my wall, if you like, where I read this book and I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, and I was able to kind of get a more complete picture. So it was an accidental find, but a book that I think if somebody is looking to embark on this idea of positioning and making their business different, uh, that is a good start. That is a good start. Read that book and then sort of try this idea of sense making to find that uniqueness.
Brilliant, and it's right up your street. It's the book you recommend. You put the recommended beforehand. The book you're still recommending. So brilliant. I
Yes,
love that. Thank you very much for that.
no worries.
So it's been great talking, and I'm sure we will try and find some space to do this again sometime and carry on the conversation. But in the meantime, if someone wanted to find out a little bit more about you, you SenseMaker, where's the best place for them to come and stalk you, so to speak?
Yeah, so LinkedIn,
Uh-huh.
LinkedIn / Brad Bucceri, or one word. And very soon our website. So we've got a site up at the moment, sensemaker.co.uk, but as I said, 21 years. We're launching a new site in the next week or two, and everything that we've spoken about today, the flavors of that will be on that site. So it will be hopefully a useful resource for people. So keep an eye on that, sensemaker.co.uk.
Brilliant, and I will put the links to those in the comments to wherever you find this. So
Perfect.
thanks again, Brad, for a great conversation. I look forward to revisiting this down the line.
Yes.
And thank you very much again for spending the time with us. So
Thanks for having me, and speak soon.
brilliant, and we'll speak to you all later. So, for those people who come across this, I'd love having these conversations. If you're looking to spend some time with me and having the same sort of conversation, then do say hi. But in the meantime, I hope your second half of the week is your best half, and I'll see you next time.